folks. Welcome back to another episode of the BoomBastiCAST. I got myself, Mathew, up in the business, and we got Alexander the Great in the building. You know what I mean?
Heck
Uh,
yeah.
we hope you all enjoying season
Eight.
nine,
Eight.
season eight.
Yeah.
It's going so good. I thought we were a season ahead. That's how good it was going. We're having a lot of fun bringing this to y'all. And today we got a great guest with us. You know what I mean? Author, podcaster, in the business of late night television. Mark Malkoff doing it big, super cool dude. Author, I said author, right?
Yep. You said author. And
Hold that bad boy up there. Let the world see. You
this
know what I
is
mean?
his book, Love
Love
Johnny
Johnny
Carson.
Carson. Here's Johnny. I gotta pop it in there, you know what I mean? Shining style. But this sit down was a lot of fun. Link for that book in the description, and the podcast link we'll put in there too. Mark was a super cool dude. A lot of really great stuff, you know what I mean? Full of knowledge on all things late night, not just Johnny Carson, but all things late night, which was cool. And comedy, you know what I mean? This was a lot of fun, you know what I'm saying? Um, Alexander Hauck brought this to the airwaves, maybe? No? No, I think that Mark
Well,
brought
actually,
this
this
to the
is
airwaves.
he actually hit me up, which is it's always great when we do our show and we have people who hit us up and they say, "Hey, we like what you do. We would love to be on your show." And we love hearing that. We love bringing people on that like what we do and want us to talk to them and help promote what they're doing, talk about the things that they've done in the past, and about their passions. And that's how we got Mark on our episode today.
New friendships were forged, if you will, you know?
Forged in Mount Doom.
But like I said, I had a lot of fun with this episode. I know Alex did too. Learned a lot about him. Knew a little bit going in. Learned a lot more, and learned that we are one. I think that we all kind of gravitate to the same type of stuff, and are fans of the same type of comedy and late night stuff. And I just can't say enough. A lot of fun. I really had a lot of fun with Mark. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah, and it was great because um, he is a big fan. I mean, ourselves are big fans too of the great late Johnny Carson, and Johnny Carson is still. I mean, we're talking about 30 years, okay,
yeah,
and that even to this day, people still talk to her. I don't think there's a late night show host that doesn't, tip their hat when Johnny Carson is mentioned, because
have to.
Johnny Carson, really reinvented and created such a great format. And there's there's so many great comedians we would never have even seen or heard of if it wasn't for Johnny Carson. And he really believed in promoting and pushing great talent. And that's one thing I will always love Johnny Carson for, because I mean, we have a lot of great late night show hosts out there, and they do a great job. But the one thing that I mean, I understand that the reason that they kind of stopped doing it was they weren't getting the numbers that they wanted. But one of the things that I loved about Johnny was he was bringing in people that we didn't know and promoting them, and then they became stars. And that's one thing that I will always love Johnny Carson for.
The BoomBastiCAST was a very little unknown podcast before we went on the Johnny Carson show. And it made us huge. Uh,
Yes, yes.
Johnny's, we are commentators ourselves. We are journalists, if you will, of the pop culture and entertainment vibes, being hosts of the BoomBastiCast. And even for us on a podcast, there's stuff to look at Johnny and kind of, look up to and try to emulate and try and, you take a little bit like anybody who's any good at anything. And I'm not saying we're any good at anything, but I'm saying anybody that's any good at anything looks at the people that did it before them and picks things that, you know, we call it influence, you know what I mean? Sometimes a homage can be used. Um, but yeah, Johnny is super, super, super talented dude. Changed late night. And just like I say in the interview, I love going back and looking at old interviews from like Carson. I love go like when I like to go back and watch those interviews with I don't know, celebrities of yesterday, I guess we'll say, and just get to know them, you know what I mean? Because you don't get the chance to, yeah, unfortunately, you'll never see them on the BoomBastiCAST, but you never see newer interviews with them to kind of see what they're like, you know what I mean? Like we talk about on the show, it's like a lot of people live in that like kind of secrecy. They want, it's an art form. Like I don't matter. It's the performance that you see on the screen that matters, which we talk about is kind of a commendable, I think that's a word. I think I might have messed that up, but it's definitely an honorable part of the profession, the mystique, that really kind of it sells all the work that they do. You know what I mean? It's like if you're gonna go watch a dude, if you're gonna watch Bobby De Niro, like he's a dude that didn't really do interviews. And it's like if you're gonna get to know Bob De Niro, you might not look Robert De Niro the same way. You know what I'm saying? But the old interviews are very cool. I suggest to everybody if you're not watching podcasts from us or podcasts from Mark, dip into Dick Cavett, Johnny Carson, Charlie Rose, a lot of good folks, you know what I mean? My Charlie Rose classic, dude. 90s, he was reigning supreme like late 80s, mid 80s through the 90s, through at least to the mid 90s, I think. I love watching. I go back and I watch Tarantino interviews. You know what I mean? I watch like David Foster Wallace interviews on Charlie Rose and stuff like that. Um, you know, it's just definitely a good deal. But Johnny Carson, we'll talk about Johnny Carson, like we'll say in the episode, is like very groundbreaking. It came at a time when, you know, current event topics, it put everybody in the room for those conversations, you know what I mean, which is extremely important. We talk about it now with like your late night deal. If it wasn't for podcasts, realistically, I think podcast has become the new late night. It's a forum that puts everybody in the conversation at once, you know what I mean? But without Carson becoming what it was, I don't it'd be who's to say, you know what I mean, that it would become the podcasts would be what they are today, because it's like even in the night when I was coming up in the 90s and the Alex Zoc was coming, me and him were coming, 80s babies, growing up in the 90s, you know, handsome heinies doing it big. You'd even listening to like AM radio was like not cool. But the more you think about it, now that's all podcasts are, is like AM radio. But back in the day, dude, like, why throw on some AM when you got some FM, brother? You know what I'm saying? That's how it goes. But yeah, this was a good eye-opening, interesting journey that we took with Mark into yesterday's past and why you should appreciate it and why it matters today. You know what I mean? So that's why I was super excited and very happy to sit down with our guest today, the great Mark Malkoff. Welcome to the BoomBastiCAST. Mark, welcome to the BoomBastiCAST.
Thanks so much. Nice to see you both.
You too, you too. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. You
Okay.
know what I mean? We talk
Yeah.
about some good stuff. We got Johnny Carson in the building, in the spirit form at least.
Yeah,
Legend.
I talked to over 400 people. I know you've had guests, like one of your last guests was talking about Rodney Dangerfield and Letterman and Leno, and
Yeah.
I talked to a lot of those people, and it's unbelievable. The everyone, for whatever reason, I didn't know this, would want to tell me their Johnny Carson story, so we captured as many as we could.
You got to talk to Rodney?
I didn't.
Oh,
He's
I was
the
gonna
one.
say, geez. Yeah,
That would have been a dream of dreams. You know, he did Carson's show over something like 80 times.
yeah.
And most comedians that would go on the show would do 25 jokes and leave. Rodney would do 25 jokes doing stand up and then sit down with Johnny and do another 25 more. So prolific. Millions of views on YouTube from even like younger people that weren't even alive that just there is funny those Johnny appearances with Rodney. I mean, they feuded in the 60s. I mean, Johnny didn't book him until 1969. I can go into that if you want, but they
Yeah.
definitely were on bad terms for a while and it got better.
Because I love Rodney is my favorite comedian of all time, I
Yes.
think. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
he was so powerful. He wrote Johnny Carson a letter using a lot of obscenities, accusing Carson's writing, one of his writers of ripping off one of Rodney's jokes. And Rodney then couldn't get booked until it was like 1969. He was at the Copacabana, Johnny Carson and his friend, and Rodney helped get them in because there was a huge line to get in for Tony Bennett. And Rodney apologized. And Johnny basically told Rodney's manager, okay, I'll finally have him on, but he's not sitting down with me at the couch. I'm not going to call him over. But Rodney was so powerful that Johnny had no choice but to call him over, and history
Yeah.
was made. And Rodney would be in his bathrobe before the show in the dressing room with his socks being held up by garters. And he was just so superstitious, would always write out his Johnny Carson jokes on a piece of cardboard that would be he would get from a dry cleaner that would be on the like a cardboard that would be for like a shirt, and it always had to be that type of cardboard. He was very superstitious.
Interesting. Yeah, I know that he like didn't with Jack Roy, I think was his original
Yes,
stand-up deal, and he didn't really get anywhere with it till he quit, he did vinyl siding, and then he came
that's
back at
right.
like 60 or something like that, or 50. And that's when the Rodney Dangerfield that we know really blew up.
Yeah, and then in 1983 he helped or 82 he helped Johnny Carson get home. Johnny was drunk at a comedy club. Johnny struggled with his drinking. He talked about it on the Tonight Show. Rodney got him home and Johnny never apologized. So Rodney refused to do the show for like 8 years, and it wasn't until Carson's like last few months that Rodney got a little nostalgic and he was promoting I think Ladybugs for Paramount that he finally went back with Johnny, and it was like no time had passed. I mean, I think he's probably my favorite stand-up that ever did Johnny's show. Definitely the best.
Well, Carson was like he's known to be like the godfather of
Yeah.
late night. Was there anybody that was just smaller than him before him, or was it just kind of he came on the scene and made it what it was?
I mean, there's people like that had the Tonight Show before, like Steve Allen and Jack Parr. Like Jack Parr, like Jonathan Winters and some other people. Like Joan Rivers went on Jack Parr's Tonight Show, but nothing happened. It wasn't until she did Carson Show in 1965 that, I mean, the next day, the gossip columnist, everyone, Walter Winchell, the next Carol Burnett. I mean, Rivers was back with Carson like a week later. She was unbelievable. There were shows, but no, not the power. Like Freddie Prinze in 1974 has a sitcom. He's the number one sitcom. This unknown guy within 6 months is the number one sitcom from going on Carson's show and getting called over. I mean, that was the power. I mean, Dave Letterman, 4 appearances as guest hosting the show as an unknown, and soon, within a couple years, has his own late night show. The stories are endless. Like someone like Stephen Wright from Massachusetts. I mean, Stephen
Sure.
Wright had tears in his eyes telling me the story. I mean, it was Peter LaSalle, Johnny's producer, was in Massachusetts, just in Cambridge, just looking at colleges with his daughter, and happened to go to the one of the clubs and see Stephen, and that's how he got plucked from complete obscurity. I mean, Stephen Wright told me it was like going to the moon or going to Mars. It was like his dream of dreams, but did never thought it would ever happen.
Yeah, there's a great documentary. I think it's called When Stand Up Stood Out, which
Yeah.
they get heavy into that because Carson was like you said, it was one of those things like that's what you strive for as a comedian because once you got on there, it
Mhm.
was like the golden path to success. You know what I mean?
It really was. I mean, people like George Wallace, who's one of the funniest comedians ever, told me within 48 hours, he went from like playing these small dinky clubs to opening up for Natalie Cole and like it was like, I don't know, 10,000 seat arena or something like that. I mean, it was, going from broke to having like David Brenner went from just having a few dollars to $10,000 the next day with a deal. I mean, it was one thing after another of these people just playing the small clubs, and then suddenly they're in Las Vegas making $5,000 a week. And this is in the 70s and 80s, so do the inflation, do the math.
Yeah.
Yeah, people got very, very emotional talking about what Carson did. Not only that, but you know, he would help the young comedians with their material. Like George Lopez when he went on Carson's show afterwards, and I heard this from many comedians. George Carson just dropped by George Lopez's dressing room and said, "You know what? If you maybe change this joke to this and maybe add something, I think you will get a bigger laugh." And George Lopez tried it the next day and he said he got the biggest laugh. And Johnny was absolutely right. But he could be very generous with young comics.
Yeah, I mean, bring up Dangerfield again real quick. Like when you think of, I put both Carson and Dangerfield in that same category of generosity with comics. You know what I mean? Like
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
there's generation, like you could like pretty much just about everybody from like the 80s up. I get to a certain point, obviously, but like without Rodney, like putting them on them HBO specials and stuff.
Kinnison, Jim
Kinnison,
Carrey, Kinnison. We
Dice,
can, yeah, yeah,
Seinfeld, Roseanne, all these
yeah.
people that blew into huge spots, you know. Yeah, and in show business, generosity is very rare in regards to that. You know what I mean?
They were both really loyal. Like Rodney and Johnny seemed very they were loyal, but if that loyalty was broken, oh my
Yeah,
goodness. I mean, Rodney would turn on the person, Johnny would turn on the person. I mean, when Joan Rivers got her own show opposite Johnny and didn't tell him in advance, and then tried to take Johnny's producer and all five talent coordinators and offered
yikes.
double their salary to go from Johnny to her. I mean, Johnny was just
Well,
it broke
that's
his
shady
heart.
business. That's like shady business though for on her part.
To
You know
do
what I
that to your
mean?
mentor, oh my
Yeah,
goodness. After everything he did, I mean, he made her the permanent guest host for the first time in the history of the Tonight Show, and she broke Sinatra's record for
really.
residency at a hotel in either Vegas or Atlantic City, and was like, it was unbelievable what he did to her, and then he just couldn't believe that that's how she broke his heart.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame them. You know what I mean? That's the thing. Like we're talking about how generosity like that's so rare, and then but the hand gets bitten, and then it kind of makes you question not just that relationship, but like everybody that you help. It just puts you in this weird like mind state. You know what I mean?
Yeah, some people like Dave Letterman were so loyal to Carson. Like I think it was almost like first of all, Johnny wanted him to have the Tonight Show Letterman, but Letterman was so loyal that he felt he could not even ask NBC to put it in his contract. He'd get the Tonight Show when Johnny retired. He's basically one of his friends told me that Dave said, I can't do this while Johnny was still has the show. I just can't do that to him. He thought that would be rude or something. And it
Yeah.
cost him getting the Tonight Show for sure.
I mean, that's a war in itself, like the Letterman and
Oh
Leno deal. You know what I
gosh.
mean?
Jay gave me 50 minutes and we talked about it. And, you know, Jay's like, they just, they gave me the Tonight Show. It made sense. I was guest hosting the Tonight Show. They just gave it to me. I'm like, Jay, you went to every single NBC affiliate with your manager, Helen Kushnick. You were politicking for the
Yeah.
job. There's a lot more to it. And we talked about it, and there was a lot of drama. But Jay was very, very nice to give me the time, and he's a nice man. He's very good with his fans,
Oh yeah.
photos, autographs. There's a lot of good things about Jay.
Oh, I love them both. I can't like I'm just a spectator, so like their issue's their issue, but I always loved and respected both of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Jay on Dave Letterman's show. I mean, Jay got banned from Johnny Carson show for 7 years. Best thing that ever happened to him. Jay starts
Yeah.
going on Dave Letterman's 12:30 show, gets red hot. So red hot that Carson changes his mind. 1986 brings Leno back to his show. And Leno, being very shrewd, said, I will come back, but let me guest host. They let him guest host twice. He did very well. 1988 or 87, they offered Gary Shandling the permanent guest host. He turned it down. They reluctantly gave it to Leno, and he used it as leverage. He
Hmm.
said, "I will do it. I will do it for." It was like $512 per show, which was some. I think that was scale because everyone else wanted all this money, and Jay knew that this was coming out from Johnny Carson's pockets. Johnny had owned the show, so it was coming out from Carson Productions. So Jay said, "I'll do it for scale." Of course, he got it, and he
Yeah.
leveraged that into getting the Tonight Show and got his money up in Vegas, shot through the roof. Very, very wise.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to be smart in that business in the situation like that is to know that what you might take a hit on with that, you're going to make up in your
Yes,
shows. You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, the only issue I ever had with Leno was what he did to Conan O'Brien. I thought that was pretty shitty, but
Yeah, there's
yeah,
definitely I think it worked out for Conan. I feel like I mean when I talked to Jay, Jay basically implied, if Conan had a better show, it would have worked. And I said, Jay, your show for the first year was not good. You Conan only had like 8 months, something like that. Not enough time.
yeah.
You need at least a year to figure that show out. And then Jay deflected and said, the first 2 weeks we did were live. And I said, that's pretty cool. I mean, rarely are those shows live, but they take a while. But yeah, I think Jay to this day still takes some flack for the Conan thing. It got ugly, unfortunately.
Well, Conan was like he came from The Simpsons and stuff. He had like a built-in cult audience, I feel like. His audience were big. They're not maybe not bigger than the other ones, but like they were rabid Conan fans. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if they just didn't show up for it or what the deal was.
It's just there's an adjustment period. I mean, right now, Stephen Colbert's number one, but the first year he was number three, and everyone said, this isn't working. This was a bad choice. It just the shows take a while. I don't think anybody really fought when you move to 11:30. For the most part, it just he just needed more time. I think he would have figured it out. I could have been wrong, but I think Conan is in the best possible position with his podcast. He's way more popular, I think, with the younger people than any of the other late night hosts.
Sure.
I mean, he's such a rock star. I used to go to the Conan show when it first started in 1993 in September. They couldn't fill the studio audience because he was so unpopular. No one wanted to be there. They thought this guy was terrible. It
Yeah.
was less than 200 seats. The NBC pages would be on the streets of New York City begging people to go see Conan O'Brien. Who's Conan O'Brien? So that it was interesting to see Conan's rise. That show at least took about a year, I think, for the audiences to get excited to see him, maybe even more.
Mm.
But that was great to be there. I always thought he was amazing, just in terms of what the show was and the writing and so forth.
Was he after Letterman or was he? Yeah, that's what.
Yeah,
Right?
it
Yeah.
was like Conan says he remembers even before he got the gig, like whoever gets this job after Dave Letterman is in such trouble because
Yeah.
anybody, I mean, Dave was so good at the 12:30 show. And Johnny Carson, same thing with Jack Parr, who was before Johnny at the Tonight Show. Johnny turned it down several times. Everybody told him to turn it down, but his wife, Johnny didn't realize his wife secretly arranged for two NBC people to come to see Johnny perform at a Friars Club roast, and they were the ones. She's like, offer Johnny the Tonight Show. Johnny had no idea how powerful she was. She was getting producers at the Tonight Show hired and fired,
Hmm.
and Johnny had no clue the power that his wife had yielded behind the scenes.
Yeah. So he did the Friars Club. I never really
Yeah.
knew like where Carson kind of came from. What his like back was he? Did he do stand up or I know the Friars Club's more like you going and you roast people,
Yeah.
right?
He started in radio in Nebraska, and then he did some TV, and then he was in Los Angeles locally with TV, and then went national for a little bit, and then got canceled.
Oh,
And then he hosted a game show called Who Do You Trust here in New York City for about 4 or 5 years. Ed McMahon was the announcer, and then he got offered the Tonight Show, turned it down a couple times before, and the person before him was very known for being very controversial. He would cry on air,
hmm.
feud with people. People like Jimmy Hoffa sued him. I mean, there was just all this. Some of it was professional wrestling, but some of,
Yeah.
in terms of like manufactured controversy, some of it was real. But so everybody thought, I'm not saying everybody, but some people thought Carson was very dull in the beginning and boring, and they wanted it to be combative. And Johnny believed, I'm going to do an entertainment show and I'm going to stick to my vision. It just, again, took him a little bit of time. But it was unheard of for somebody to dominate 30 years. Those jobs were only 4 or 5 years and then you left. It was unheard of for anybody to stay even 10 years at that point as a late night host.
Yeah. 30 years he did it, huh?
Yeah, I mean, his run is unprecedented. I mean, he was so good at what he did. I mean, the fact that, it's been 30 years since he had a show, he's been up the air, and all the late night hosts still talk about him. He still makes headlines. They do those polls every few years, greatest late night host of all time, and Carson's always voted number one. I mean, there's never been one of those things where he was not number one. So the work holds up for sure.
So did he go out like on top or what was the story
Yeah.
with his?
Yeah, he went out on top. Arsenio was doing very, very well,
Yeah.
but Carson still was number one. He hated the Saturday Night Live sketches with Dana Carvey playing him in the beginning. In the beginning, they were not. He thought they were fine, but he thought they got mean spirited. They made him out to be very out of touch, and he just thought, you know what? I don't need this. I don't want to be perceived as old and out of touch like Bob Hope was. He thought Bob Hope stayed away way too long. So Carvey was, and Robert Smigel, who wrote those sketches, was one of the reasons that Johnny said, you know what? I don't need this, and I'm gonna get out.
It's funny you say that because I believe Dana Carvey was the dude that got Eddie Murphy to like not want to come back.
Oh, yeah, I thought that might be right. I thought it was David Spade on
Oh,
Hollywood Minute came back.
it
I
could
think
have been
Yeah,
Spade
it was
yeah.
David Spade that made the joke.
Yeah.
Spade came back to host the show, I think, and did, or it might have been on Spade in America. It was one of those things where he said, "Oh, look, kids, a falling star," because Eddie Murphy had a
Yeah.
movie that didn't do well, and Eddie Murphy called up on Monday and said, called up Spade and said, just like laid into him, and I
Yeah.
think Spade was afraid Murphy was gonna do something. But Johnny had problems with Saturday Night Live. He wouldn't let any of the original cast from 1975 to 80 be a guest while they were on the show. Steve Martin, when he guest hosted, he snuck John Belushi in, but he had to put him in the audience. So they did a cameo of Belushi in the audience, but they couldn't really have him on as a guest. But that's the closest to any of the current of those cast members getting on the show while they were cast members. So Carson definitely, I mean, had some issues with the show.
That's interesting because I never even thought of that. They weren't on. They were like big time. You're talking Chevy
Yeah,
Chase, Belushi,
that's right. Chevy had
Murray.
to apologize. Chevy sent Johnny an apology letter and said, "I'd love to come on the show. I'm sorry, I've said some things." And that was 1977 or 78. And Chevy wasn't on the show at that point. And Johnny was like, "Okay, sure." And they became friends. They played poker. There was a game. I wish we could be a fly on the wall. Steve
Yeah.
Martin, Carl Reiner, Chevy Chase, Johnny Carson. Neil Simon. Johnny is the reason Saturday Night Live even exists to this day. Johnny didn't want Tonight Show reruns at 11:30 on Saturdays. So Lorne Michaels, the creator, and Dick Ebersol had to sit down with Johnny and tell him we have this idea for a show and get his blessing. And Johnny said, okay, as long as it's not like the Tonight Show, go do your thing. He just didn't realize that it would kind of cause him to retire and they would make fun of him, and it broke his
Yeah.
heart. But what can you do?
I gotta say, one thing that I always loved about Carson, more than a lot of other, hosts, is the fact that he made a lot of comic careers.
That's
That
right.
it was. I mean, now that you got, I mean, nothing against like Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel or
Yeah.
Stephen Colbert. Most of the guests that they have, they're already known. They're already,
Sure.
they're doing big budget movies. They're
Mhm.
political, or they're
Yeah.
no one's a rising star. But with Johnny Carson, you got the bump. I mean, it
It's
was,
true.
If you liked
yeah.
it, if you liked it.
Yeah, Roseanne got a sitcom out of it. Ellen DeGeneres got called over. I mean, the power of that show was like no other show. And then Jay Leno in the beginning had stand-ups, but the producer noticed that the ratings would go down when they had stand-ups on. So then they almost never had stand-ups on. And it was such a shame because Jay never would have, risen with the ranks to how he did without being a guest and doing stand-up on shows. So it's a shame that that doesn't exist anymore, but yeah, Johnny was really, really good with nurturing those talent.
Was
Yeah.
Gilbert Gottfried ever on? He had to have been on.
Okay,
Yeah.
Gilbert, I sat down with Gilbert, and
Yeah.
Gilbert was never booked on Carson's show, and I'll tell you why, and then I'll tell you a story about getting together with Gilbert. So Gilbert wasn't allowed on the show because Johnny wouldn't put anybody on if they were in character. And Johnny thought the audience couldn't tell if the person was real or not. Like so, Paul Rubens as Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
He thought that it wasn't clear whether that this person was for real or not. Like Super Dave Osborne, Bob
Mhm.
Einstein. That was okay. It was clearly a joke. Father Guido Sarducci, Don Novello, clearly a joke. So Gilbert was not allowed on. So I sat down with Gilbert and I asked Gilbert if he would do it. And his wife said, if you bring him a sandwich, if you pay for it, he'll probably talk to you. So I have to get on the phone with Gilbert, and Gilbert says turkey on a roll. Like he's notoriously known for being cheap and just
Right. Yeah.
liking free
Yeah.
stuff. So I get him the sandwich, I get the drink, I get the cookie. I show up to his Chelsea apartment and I ask him, I said, "Do you know if Johnny's ever mentioned you by name on the show?" And he's like, "No, I don't think so." So I show him this monologue joke where Johnny mentions him because Gilbert got in lots of trouble at the Emmys with this risque routine, and Johnny mentions him by name, and Gilbert couldn't believe it. He's like, "Can we watch it?" We watched it like 4 times, and I emailed it to his wife later, so we had the clip. But that was really amazing for Gilbert to see that Carson actually did mention him by name.
I feel like I seen Kaufman on there, which he's kind of,
Yes,
but
that's a
he's
good point.
like that deal, too. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That is it. Kaufman was one of those things that they waited until it was very clear that this guy was a star and that he was doing a bit. So,
Yeah.
but if there was any confusion, like Judy Tenuta or Emo Phillips, they wouldn't be on Carson's show. For example, like Ali G. Like in the early days, then Carson wouldn't have had him on, but once he was established and people know this is Sacha Baron Cohen,
Yeah.
that would have been okay. So. But yeah, Kaufman went on the show a couple times, and I mean, he was so funny. I mean, so he'd be in the green room with the talent coordinator from Carson still doing Foreign Man in
Yeah.
character backstage. I mean, Andy was like that. It seemed like he was always in character 24/7. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, he was I mean, you can't really put anybody else in the category of Kaufman, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To the point where people still think he faked his death, you know what I mean? Because he
I
was
mean,
always doing something like that, you know what I mean?
the Carnegie Hall special with Robin Williams is one of my favorite comedy specials albums. It's yeah, what that guy did. Nobody has come close to doing anything like Andy did to that level since. I mean, he was such an original. I mean, when he went on Letterman, those Letterman appearances, I mean, Andy was such a special comic.
And it's the performance comedy, you know what I mean? Like those other people we talked about, they become characters and they do stand up. Kaufman became these characters and just did the character. It was a weird, great, but like a weird dynamic that it was, you know what I
The
mean?
thing is he was such a brilliant comic, but I've talked to people before that knew him from the wrestling days, and he was willing to give up his comedy career to do the wrestling full time. I mean, that was his dream. I
Yeah.
mean, he looked at Buddy Rogers, Fred Blassie, and all these people, and he just being a wrestling heel was what he would have given up comedy for, which is unbelievable. Because for a comedian to get to where the level of Andy is, that was like the pinnacle and the dream. But Andy was willing to throw that away if he could have been a wrestling star.
I mean, if he stuck around longer, he probably would have been on the WWE. They would have
I
eventually brought
think
him in.
so. Because Vince Jr. really wanted him on, and Vince Sr. is the one that just thought it was too hokey. And
Yeah.
Vince Jr. is the one that got upset and is like, no, this is the future. This is what I want this company to be. So I think you're right. It probably would have been inevitable for him to go over there eventually.
Yeah, like if he was alive now, he'd probably be up there. I'd say maybe
Yeah.
pushing his 70s maybe, but
The
yeah.
fact Andy's in the Hall of Fame of the WWE would make him so happy
Yeah.
that he's in one of those things. I mean, that was hearing like Bill Apter, who did all the wrestling magazines, that like Andy could be hanging out with like A-list celebrities, but he wants to hang out with Bill Apter and go to his apartment and just talk wrestling when he's like this huge star on Taxi. I mean, Andy, I got a huge kick out of him and the love for wrestling. So,
I
yeah.
wonder if they put him as a secret player in like the video games. He should definitely be like somebody
Oh,
you can unlock.
wow.
That'd be
That
cool.
would be fun. Yeah, he was so funny. The whole Jerry Lawler thing in Memphis
Oh,
was such
yeah.
an amazing angle. The people there hated him.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, Andy was such a good like playing in character. I mean, oh my goodness, they believed it.
It's dangerous. I mean, that was a time in
Yeah.
wrestling, especially in those southern territories where it was like church. It was like, you know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
like Freddie Blassie, I believe, got stabbed a few times just
He,
because like they're the villain and
yeah.
people can't decipher reality in the show. You know what I
They
mean?
didn't they set his car on fire as well. I
Yeah.
mean, it was those territories before when kayfabe was still enforced. You're right. Hearing those stories about them getting stabbed and just what they had the lengths that they had to go. I mean, it was Even in the 80s, when you think like kayfabe wasn't really there as much, like Nikita Koloff, Scott Simpson having legally changing his name to Nikita Koloff and having a Russian accent in public all the time, like the lengths that people would go back then to for their gimmick it is really cool. Carson would put wrestlers on though back that which was really cool back in the 60s and 70s. A lot of people went on. Hogan, when he passed away, they put on a clip of I think Hogan was still in AWA at that point, was still with Vern Gagne, and he went on Carson, and they put a clip on when he passed away.
The Muhammad Ali went on Carson.
Oh
That was
yes.
big. That was a big one. Yeah.
Muhammad Ali, when he knew he was in Houston in 1967, he knew he was going to get arrested the next day for refusing to join the army and go into
Yeah.
Vietnam or the military. Howard Cosell walks into his hotel room and he finds Ali under the covers in bed and he's watching Johnny Carson. That's what he was doing the night before he knew he was going to get arrested. There was something really comforting about Carson's show in America during the most tumultuous times. I'm talking Vietnam, Kennedy assassin, RFK getting assassinated, Martin
Yeah.
Luther King, people tuning into Carson for some stability. He was really, really a rock for people with when things were really difficult in America.
Yeah, I mean, even some of like the racial stuff, bringing people together now, like a lot of Richard Pryor
Sure, he loved
appearances.
Pryor.
Pryor is the man. Yeah, there was a lot of.
No, no, you're right. He was putting Richard Pryor, and Richard Pryor was one of his favorite comedian. I mean, Carson would go see Pryor in concert. I mean, he was in awe of Pryor.
Yeah, I gotta say, what I really love about like late night show hosts like Carson and Colbert and so forth and so on is like going with what you said that during some of our toughest times, with pretty much the world going to hell, they are kind of the, I would say, almost comfort food to try to get you through some of the hard times. I mean, I mean, their commentary on what's going on, their jokes, they kind of take, the thing that everyone's scared about, everyone's dealing with, and kind of like make people feel like that it's going to be okay. And I think that's very important. Carson did that. Colbert does that. I mean, there's so many that just you kind of need during these tough times
Yeah.
that are able to take all the scary stuff in the world and making it you know maybe not less scary, but giving you hope.
Definitely comfort. I think David Letterman with September 11th. He was the I think the first host back, and it's kind of historic television with him talking just from his heart. He had nothing planned, and I think that it's really sad that it does seem like that those shows are starting to go away, and there's not going to be at least on a level of Johnny Carson or Letterman in terms of the it's going to be scaled down. Like Seth Meyers, his band was taken away. Stephen Colbert's #1 in the ratings and still getting canceled, apparently for not being profitable enough or losing
Yeah.
money, allegedly. So it's a shame that those shows are going to maybe they won't go away, but they're going to be scaled down a lot. But hopefully there'll still be something that resembles one of those shows.
What do you think would if they were to stop the Tonight Show type stuff, that the late night shows? What do you think would come? Just nothing, or syndicated TV shows? What do you think they'd throw in there?
A game shows seem to be the cheapest option. They seem that that might be what's going to happen. I don't know. I really hope either on YouTube or streaming that there's some sort of late night show. John Mulaney on Netflix did some episodic late night stuff, and it was really fun. He actually modeled the set after Johnny Carson's home in Malibu, which was really a nice nod to Carson. So hopefully something like that will exist, but we shall see.
Do you think that like how big podcasts have become, that's kind of been a burden on the late night interview medium type thing?
I think so, because back in the day, you would just have to tune into on TV if you wanted to see people, and now they're all on podcast. I mean,
Uh,
I definitely think that that is part of it. I got in the right time when I started doing my podcast with Johnny Carson. I launched in February of 2014, and I still would have to explain to people what a podcast was. It was unheard
right.
of for a famous person to have their own podcast. So I was able to get really big people to come on to talk to me. Whereas now it's jury duty for a famous person to do a podcast.
For
They're
sure.
always asked to do
Yeah.
podcasts. They have to do their own friends' podcast, and then and anything else is just like just a pain in the butt. So I got in at the right time. I mean, I was able to talk to Mel Brooks about being on Johnny's very first show, October 1st, 1962. Just talk to people that were there. I mean, not only the comedians that Johnny made, someone like Jimmy Buffett told me, Mark, you're the first one that has ever asked me about Johnny Carson. It was the biggest break of my career. I couldn't get booked on television before Johnny Carson. So I got in at the right time to hear these people tell their stories before the podcast boom.
Hope Johnny got it. All you could drink at Margaritaville for
Yeah.
hooking up
Oh, yeah.
like that.
Margaritaville. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the when you because when I think of late night shows, I enjoy them, but it's like the biggest burden on them is like the time slot. You know what I mean? So like you get maybe four questions asked before commercial break, come back, maybe another four
Mm,
questions, and it's over. Next guest. That's where podcasts do kind of reign supreme in that medium because you can get an hour and a half. You take like a Rogan where you get like 3 hour interviews with
sure.
people, you know what I mean? And I think that's more what people like because it's like you're not getting that quick, almost on the street interaction while you're walking by, ask them a few questions. You're getting that actual spending an evening with that person type deal almost, you know what I
I
mean?
think I think people want the people that are listening to podcasts or anybody longs for authenticity and some sort of I don't know if danger is the word, but like where's this gonna go? Whereas I think late night for the most part there isn't danger. There's no surprises. The mistakes where Carson and early David Letterman, they would leave the mistakes in. There was danger, and there really it doesn't exist anymore. They put on for the most part very maybe predictable guest and like Johnny Carson wouldn't put somebody on unless they were a good talker. And now it's all about if you're famous and you have a big social media following, they're gonna put you on even if it's
Yeah,
Dullsville. Like Don Rickles was danger. Dangerfield had danger. The only guest now that might have some danger maybe is Howard Stern, maybe Letterman when he's a guest on stuff, but I kind of miss that. There doesn't really exist on the late night shows that much anymore.
definitely. Like with Richard Pryor, like the
Oh yeah.
like he would be there's like I recently watched one the other day through the beauty of like TikTok or whatever where you got to give him credit for that for stuff popping up where there's like some like rich white lady that he got interviewed with and she's like people in America aren't on the streets and he's like he was being like the man on the streets like speaking for the people which I think that he's a great comedian but he's just a great overall talker, humanitarian,
Absolutely.
whatever you want to call it. And he's just like, no, like we America deals with these issues too, and really opened up the conversation and the minds of people that really had no idea what was going on outside of their neighborhood. You know what I mean?
You bring up a couple of great issues. One, first of all, Pryor was a genius and brilliant and such a smart man. Second thing is with the shows that today they don't have the panel anymore. Carson would keep the guests on,
Yeah.
and you would have some of the most interesting people that were very different. You would have someone like Richard Pryor. It could be a doctor, and could be Don Rickles and Glenn Campbell, or Chevy Chase and Gallagher got into a verbal altercation. It
Yeah.
was really uncomfortable. You had George Papard, who was Hannibal from the A Team, drunk out of his mind, calling Paul Williams a midget, the singer Paul Williams, and Paul Williams getting up ready to fight George Papard. And this is
Yeah.
all gets into TV. They don't stop taping. Carson lost control and he runs off the show. I mean, it was chaos. And there was definitely a danger with that panel. And I kind of missed that on the late night shows today, that it doesn't exist.
Yeah. I remember Richard Pryor almost got into it with Milton Berle, I think.
Oh yeah, that was on that was on wasn't that on the Mike Douglas show?
Oh, all
Yeah,
right.
it's
My bad. Yeah.
what is no Burl says. What does Burl say? Watch your
You
step,
gotta,
baby,
you gotta choose your shots, kid, or something like
and
that.
then it's whatever you say, sweetheart. That was what Pryor
Yeah.
responded, something like that. It was yeah, Pryor was unbelievable.
But
Such a funny man.
you're right though. Like we don't get those real moments anymore like that. You know what I mean?
It's rare that they would
Yeah.
leave the mistakes in. For example, if they had a singer on like Robert Goulet or John Davidson would forget the words, instead of stop taping, Carson said, "No, you're going to keep going until you get the words right," and the
Yeah.
audiences would love it. You'd see these really famous people on that showed their human side, and the audience would have to help them. They'd be struggling, and it made for great TV. And I definitely think that was something that you probably wouldn't see today on those shows. They'd stop taping.
Yeah. You brought up Don Rickles too. Don Rickles known to be a ball buster, but you could see when he was on, you could see the love that he had for Johnny. Like
Yes.
I remember that the when I think he guest hosted for him and he broke the cigarette box and he
Yeah.
was like he thought he was gonna get like whacked out over it, which was funny. Yeah.
Don Rickles did not know Johnny was going to confront him. Like Carson had watched at home and saw that with Bob Newhart was guest hosting that Rickles had broken the box, and Johnny, in his brilliance, told his director, "I want to go across the hall." This had never been done on network television. We're going to interrupt a taping of Don Rickles' show. And in the middle of it, and put enough cord on the camera to get me over there. And Rickles, for the first time in his life, is absolutely speechless. His hero was absolutely Johnny Carson. In 1965, when Rickles debuted on Carson, nobody would put Rickles on a late night show. Johnny had to take 3 minutes and explain to his audience, my next guest, you don't know who it is. He's going to come out here. He's going to make fun of me, but it's okay. We can laugh at it. And the people were just not prepared for an insult comic. It was unheard of for someone to come on and insult the host. But Johnny was brave to put him on, and it really launched Rickles.
Yeah, that one where I mean, the one where he goes in, takes the camera, is gotta be
Yeah,
like one of those like first ever, like really behind the scenes, see behind the
it
curtain
was.
type deals. You know what I mean?
It was. It was in the mid 70s. He was on a show called CPO Sharky. And for them to interrupt the taping and Rickles not to know what was going on, would show it in every anniversary show, I think. I mean, there were certain moments on Carson's show that are just simply iconic. Like I was in Beverly Hills and I sat down with Ed Ames with the tomahawk, which the tomahawk throw is maybe one of the most famous moments of Carson's career. And Ed Ames was telling me, Mark, I didn't know how to throw a tomahawk. Ed Ames was on a TV show called Daniel Boone. It was this huge, huge show. So they decided Carson and him in 1965 were going to throw tomahawks at a wooden cutout of a cowboy. So right before rehearsal, Ed Ames is taught how to throw a tomahawk. He throws it, it hits the crotch area of the cowboy. Back then, this was very risque. To
Yeah.
this day, it is considered the longest laugh, sustained laugh in the history of television to this day from a
Yeah.
studio audience.
And bringing on the animals, all those moments with Johnny and
Yeah.
the animals are really fun too.
Absolutely. I talked to Jim Fowler. I talked to Joan Embry. Yeah, Johnny went to Africa on safari after the show ended, and he took Jim Fowler, who was on the show like 40 times. And just to hear the stories from Fowler and Embry was really great. But yeah, he was so good with the animals. Some late night hosts would make fun of the animals, and it would backfire. The audience would turn on the host. But Johnny
Yeah.
was very, very wise. He never made fun of his guests.
Yeah. Yeah, he was good like that. And the animal
Yeah.
stuff, it's like you said, he never really I feel like a lot of people would be swatting the animals. Like he'd let them crawl over his head and just the
Yeah.
expressions that he would make would get the audience going, you know.
That's right. He was the best reactionary comic. I mean, he would get laughs just with looking in the camera, and people would just start cracking up.
So, you know, when your podcast started in 2014, you
Yeah.
became a host yourself, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Is there anything that you felt carried over from your love for Johnny that you interpret into what you do with your interviews and such?
I think that like Carson was maybe one of the most well-read people that's what people that knew him said, and I would just try to do as much research as possible on my guest. I was kind of known for doing a lot of research and finding out stuff that people would be kind of shocked about my guest. I refused to ask them the same questions that they've been asked a million times, and I would try to go really obscure with stuff that I knew that I thought was interesting that maybe they hadn't talked about. So Johnny would try to do that. So I think that, and I would try when I would ask a guest a question, I would try to just be quiet and let them talk and let them until they were done talking rather than some host maybe interrupt. And sometimes I would interject if I felt I had to, but I tried to take Johnny's lesson and just kind of let my guest talk. So those are some things that I maybe took away from Carson.
Was there any guests that you were like blown away that you were able to land?
I mean, I definitely think like Mel Brooks, just because he says no to everything, but Carl
Yeah.
Reiner, his best friend, told him to do it. And then I was trying for Mel Brooks for months. And then his assistant the night before I was leaving LA is like, if you're still here tomorrow, Mel has some time for you. So that was like a dream. I definitely didn't foresee like going like Michael J. Fox. I thought was really cool
Yeah.
because before he was famous, he was at an audition at NBC and went through the dumpster and got a Johnny Carson cue card. He has it framed in one of his homes. So
Awesome.
I thought that was, I really like that. Dana Carvey, I really like talked to, even though he did break Johnny's heart. I thought he was a really fun guest. Paul Anka, who wrote Johnny's theme song, sitting. The thing is, back then, I couldn't record remotely like this. So
Yeah.
I was going to people's homes. I mean, I'd go to Los Angeles, I'd be in New York where I am, and it was either people's offices or their homes for the most part. So it was really interesting just getting to sit down with people like that. Wouldn't happen today. Usually, though, these things are always done remote these days. Not always, but it was a unique time.
Mm. Did Carvey have like deep regret about going there with about, making fun? Yeah.
Robert Smigel, who wrote the sketches, who does Triumph the Insult Comic Dog, told me it's one of his big regrets that he wrote the sketches.
Yeah.
And Carvey got banned from the show, and he did regret it. And like both of them didn't occur to them that they would upset somebody as big and successful as Johnny Carson. Norm Macdonald, who is in the book, we would text back and forth. Norm's whole theory was that like Carson was just, they thought Carson was, I'm sure, was way too big to even I don't know, for it to bother him or even be aware of the sketches. But
Right.
Carson was very sensitive and he could be thin-skinned. I mean, he banned even his friend Carl Sagan, the astronomer,
Hmm.
who during one of the appearances, Sagan interrupted Carson twice and corrected him on a statistic. And Johnny was so, I guess, embarrassed and thin-skinned, even banned his friend from going on the show. So he could
Hmm.
be hurt very easily.
Yikes. Yeah,
Yeah.
you brought up Norm Macdonald, rest in peace, another great.
Oh.
I mean,
It was Norm was like the best, wasn't he? One of the best
yeah.
comedians of all time. I love that guy.
Another guy that like Gilbert, like they don't care how far they go over the line for that laugh, you know what I
I
mean?
mean, I think Norm on Conan and was some of the best, the funniest stuff. Norm told me by text, he said that it would he one of his goals was to go on Carson's show, and they didn't deem him the gatekeeper didn't deem him good enough for that Johnny would like him, and it broke Norm's heart, and he
Mhm.
was really, really upset. But it worked out for Norm, but I miss him. I really do.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I remember like when Letterman's last show, I think Norm was on there or close to. And
that's right.
it was the first time you see Norm because Norm's the dude who's always like in it. And like sometimes you don't really know what's going on. Like if he's joking, if he's being for real, he never really shows his true side. He's another one who never talked really about his personal life. Like even his biography that he wrote is like half fake. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So, yeah.
Norm had no idea on that Letterman appearance. He was the final stand-up that he was going to break down and cry. I mean, that was
Yeah.
all in the moment. And Norm was running that set the night before at comedy clubs in bombing, and Norm was really scared out of his mind that to be the last stand-up to go on that he wasn't going to do well. And of course, he goes on and kills. But the night before, it was not going well. But luckily, it had a happy ending.
Yeah, dude, the Norm things, they're all, whenever we lose these comedians, it's always very sad because the job of a comedian is to kind of like bring levity to like the darkness around us, so to speak. And I remember he did like that Netflix special that was just like
Yeah,
him doing stand up like in front of a camera, like it was during
that's
COVID.
right.
And
Yeah.
very weird. It was such a weird, but it was very Norm, but it was like very weird, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I miss him. It was like I sat down with everyone from Bob Saget to Louis Anderson to Gilbert, and within a year, it's like they were gone, and it was really, really sad. They all of them were very nice to me.
Yeah, those three, very strange. I'd even say it was
Yeah,
less than a year. It felt like it was in like a 4 or 5 month span.
it might have been. It was
Yeah.
one thing. Yeah, it was. Someone like Bob Saget especially kept thanking me for doing this. Like he worshiped Johnny. I'm like,
Yeah.
Bob, please don't thank me. This I'm honored. I told Saget, I said, do you know the first time that you were ever mentioned on Johnny's show? I said it was before you were ever on the show, and he's like, no. I said, do you have the circumstances? And he said, no. And I said, you were mentioned on the show by Richard Pryor. And his eyes get really wide. He's like, I did a movie with him. And I said, yes. And Pryor mentioned you and talked about you. And he was just like a little kid, just so happy to hear that. And he was just a really nice, sweet man.
When Carson would do an episode, was that the length of it, or was it like did it? I know you've worked on other shows too. Like when
Sure.
what we see as an audience, like I
Yeah.
said, 4 questions, commercial, 4 questions.
Yeah.
Does it run longer in real life for the audience, or is that pretty much what it is? What we see?
Johnny would do the show in real time. So they would tape in Burbank at 5:30. They taped the first 10 years in New York, and it was they would wait 2 minutes. They would time it exactly as an hour. So it was as real as you could. Now with the shows, we'll stop and start, and sometimes they'll run late and they'll edit in post production. But unless like Della Reese had a brain aneurysm and fell to the ground, of course they're going to stop taping. But
Yeah.
for anything else, the mistakes would get in, and it was pretty much live to tape for that 1 hour and the 2 minutes. And Carson, would be chain smoking during the commercials. I mean, back in the early days in New York, drinking alcohol and smoking, and then you couldn't really do that on camera so much. So Carson during the commercials would be puffing away.
And you said Carson admittedly had like a problem with the drink.
He would talk about his drinking problem.
Yeah.
He'd talk about his problem with smoking. I mean, Carson said, some people when they drink would get fun-loving and gregarious. And Carson said, I would want to fight the room, everybody. He said, he said he would just have one drink too many and he would turn into Attila the Hun. Ed McMahon had to babysit Carson in New York and get him home many a night. And there's a couple really bad stories with the drinking that Carson didn't remember. Frank Sinatra, who he was friends with, had to intervene once and save his life, literally save his life.
Mob
He
related?
got what's up?
Like
Yes,
a
it
mob
was.
related
It was
thing?
Joe Gallo.
Oh, geez.
1971, Joe Gallo had just gotten out of prison. He was in there for a decade. Jilly Rizzo had a place, Jilly's here in New York City. Sinatra, country. Sinatra wasn't there at the time, but Carson was drunk out of his mind. Joe Gallo went to the bathroom and did something inappropriate to Gallo's girlfriend. Jilly Rizzo says to Ed McMahon, who is there, get Johnny the blank out of here. Gallo finds out, puts a hit out on Johnny, and Sinatra has to sit down with Gallo and say, listen, I need a favor. And Gallo says anything and said, Johnny Carson, you need to leave him alone. And Gallo said, you tell Carson he only lives and breathes because he knows Frank Sinatra. Not only that, but the acting boss of the mafia at that point was Joe Colombo. And in order to appease them, NBC, and I watched this with my own eyes,
Yeah.
NBC had to do a positive story on Joe Colombo and air it on NBC News. There was no reason for them to do this. I watched it. It exists. The timing on all of this matches up. So that was definitely interesting, but Sinatra was the one that saved Johnny. And whenever Sinatra needed Johnny to do something, of course Carson was going to say yes. When Sinatra produced the Ronald Reagan inaugural in D.C., Johnny didn't want to do it, but Sinatra asked him, and of course Johnny said, "Okay, I'll do it." He didn't want to, but Sinatra saved his life. Of course he's going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, Sinatra's like, it's almost you can't even talk about Sinatra with talking about like those mob ties that he had. You know what I
It
mean?
was awfully interesting to hear the Sinatra stories. I mean, I talked to Tina Sinatra. She was really nice, Frank's daughter, and
Yeah.
she guest Frank when Frank guest hosted Johnny's show that he almost was like throwing up. He was so nervous to do the show. You never think of Frank like that, but Johnny
Mm.
made doing that look so easy. I mean, Johnny would be at home and watch Arnold Palmer or Joe Namath try to guest host the Tonight Show, or people you wouldn't expect, like Cass Elliot from Mamas and the Papas,
Yeah.
people like Lauren Green from Bonanza. Chevy Chase tried to guest host in 1986 and had so much trouble. The next month, he said, "Johnny, I had no idea how hard this was. No one's ever going to be the next Johnny Carson." And then, of course, Chevy forgets how hard it is, and a few years later tries to host a late night show on Fox. He lasted 26 episodes, I believe.
Yeah.
Johnny made it look easy.
I remember I watched there was a book and they also did like a mini series about the making of The Godfather.
Yes.
It was all about like how Sinatra was going to be like Michael Corleone, I think. They were pushing for it heavy. and they didn't want to. The producers didn't want to use them, and it was like a big clash with like the real life mob as well and the movie people.
Oh wow, it's unbelievable. Wow.
It's a but showbiz expect showbiz was kind of like, especially those clubs you talk about, like comedians, a lot of those clubs that were owned by like the mob and stuff.
Copacabana, 100%.
Yeah.
In Vegas, those comedians like Rickles, they knew the mob people, and for the most part, they would say good things about them. Joe Colombo and Ed McMahon were friends. McMahon would go to Joe Colombo's for dinner. Yeah, it was kind of just this understood thing. But yeah, that was definitely show business, interesting ties.
One of my favorite Leno stories is a story he tells about working for like a club that was like he worked like some charity event for like some Catholic thing, and he said that there was like a mob guy there that donated money and was like swearing. I don't want to murder the joke, I forget it, but the guy kept
Yeah,
like saying fuck, like while talking to
yeah.
the priest, and the priest like was like, nah, don't do that. And he like freaked out on everybody.
Wow.
Yeah, it's class. I've heard him say it on a few interviews, and it's he
Yeah.
does it really good. Yeah. But yeah, man, the mob,
Oh, okay.
crazy madness of it all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Johnny, I mean, Rickles would make on Johnny's show would make fun of Sinatra with the mob ties. And
Yeah.
Sinatra always was thought that was really fun in the way Rickles did it. I think Rickles maybe was the only one that could get away with making fun of Sinatra with those that and Sinatra just thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, Rickles is a dude that I'm sure he needed some saving throughout, because just the way he's like an
Yeah.
insult comic, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
Crazy.
he had to be. I'm sure he walked a very fine line at some point. But what a talent! I miss that guy was just
Oh
maybe
yeah,
him and Rodney might have been the best two comics that went on.
I
And
agree.
and Rickles would not have anything prepared. I mean, they would do a pre-interview, but him and Johnny would toss it out, and Rickles would be backstage before the show making fun of the NBC of Carson's staff just to warm up and become Rickles, and then he would just go out there and wing it. And for as somebody to do that, I mean, Robin Williams gave the illusion that he was making everything up, but almost everything was prepared, and he made it look like it was off the top of his head, whereas Rickles could go out there and literally wing it and be hilarious.
Did you get a chance to ever talk to Robin Williams?
I didn't. I would have loved to. I
Yeah.
tried. Unfortunately, Johnny, his last show with guests. It was the second to last show. Those were the final show, no guests. Johnny just showed clips and said goodbye to America. Second to last show was Robin Williams and Bette Midler. And Robin the next day that he was on called Johnny crying. He was so honored that he got to go on Johnny's show, and it was just that was with Bette Midler, who won an Emmy for singing to Johnny. It was one of the best shows they ever did. But Robin was one of Johnny's favorites. I mean, he always delivered.
I know you got to work on the Letterman show as well. Like,
I did.
how did you branch from being like a fan of all this stuff to actually entering into that world?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so when I was in high school in Hershey, Pennsylvania, I would write off for tickets to Letterman's NBC show, and my mom would write notes to the principal or the Mark is not going to be in school for an educational trip to New York, and I'd be going to Dave's show. I went 5 times to Dave's show at NBC, and it was like I was just complete in awe of this world. I was at Dave's in his audience, his very first show at CBS on August 30th, 93. So I love the show. Even when I moved to New York to go to college, I'd be at the stage door because, I mean, I can meet George Carlin. George Carlin would come and just talk. I could talk to him and get an autograph or a photo. And I was like, this is unbelievable. So to go from that to me graduating college, it was just a friend of a friend. I did TV internships. I interned at Spin City, Michael J. Fox. I interned at the Sally Jesse Raphael show, making sure that the guests didn't get in trouble, and they did get in trouble.
Yeah.
My first money in television was actually I had to babysit one of the guests. So there was a lot of drama there, but doing those TV internships got me over to Letterman, and I was there 11 months and 15 days, but who's counting? But Dave had a rule. Dave had this rule. If you'd worked at the show, you were never allowed to be in the audience again because if he recognized somebody, it would throw him off.
Okay.
So when Johnny passed away, Dave did a tribute show, and I begged and I begged. And they said, okay, we're going to sneak you in, but you're going to be in the balcony and you have to be like, they gave me a folding chair so it wasn't technically sitting in the audience,
Yeah.
but they let me in for that. So that was amazing. But to be at Dave's show and just to work there and just to go from fan to being there was I couldn't believe I was there. It was, Dave was very closed off. I mean, I only saw him at the holiday party. I think it was the last holiday party he ever went to with the staff. And then when we took our staff photo, that those were the times. But it would have been nice to if he was a little bit more social. But unfortunately, by that point, he was pretty closed off.
Yeah. Yeah, he had like his office area, right? Where he just kind of hung out a lot of the time.
Yeah, he was on the 12th floor with like
Yeah.
5 or 6 people that he knew from 1980 that were his pals and didn't really I mean there were people on my floor on the 8th floor. They would go up to 12 and if they saw Dave they'd be like I saw him. It would be like a celebrity sighting. I'm like it's like we work for the guy, but we
Yeah.
never really saw him too much. I was very fortunate that I could be in the studio and watch him, but there were a lot of people that worked at that show that were never allowed to be in the studio until the final episode of Letterman. It was the first time they ever got to be in the studio. So I was blessed. I got to see some really great moments with Dave and the guests. But yeah, that was a treat to be there.
Yeah, the Stern's like that too, I guess. Like seeing him is very rare, you know what I mean?
I drove 3.5 hours when it was it was the summer of '94 to meet Howard Stern at the stage door at Letterman. And Stern got out of his limo. He signed a photo. My brother had a Snapple bottle because Stern was plugging Snapple and Howard signed it. And Stern was wearing a white OJ shirt. And I think that he was going on Dave's show to do an OJ routine. And
Yeah.
it was such an awe. I was over at Sirius once when I saw Stern. And believe it or not, when I went over to interview Regis Philbin, him and Stern live in the same building. I saw Howard go into the building. So yeah, whenever I've seen Howard, I'm like, oh my gosh, he is that tall, he is that skinny. But I mean, in terms of an interviewer in the last like 10, 15 years, I think Stern's interviews, unbelievable, his skill set. I mean, he
Yeah.
might be one of the best interviewers of the last couple decades, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. He has his I don't even know what you'd want to call like the 90s era where it was like that raunchy rock and roll, like which it was funny, you know what I mean? Now he's I think more focused on being that interviewer that we're talking about, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
leaving
he's definitely became something else. I think Letterman, to some extent, became something else as well. He stopped going to rehearsal. He stopped doing tapings outside the studio, and he became a little bit a different Dave. I still enjoyed the show; it just became something different. But Howard definitely is what he's doing now is you're right is extremely different. And I think some of his interviews that he did with McCartney, with Steve Martin, with Dave Letterman, with these people is just some of the best interviewing I've seen.
so like in both regards to those guys, Letterman and Stern, it's like you think they just
Yeah.
mastered the craft to the point where it was second nature, the whole deal.
I think so. I mean, I think it definitely took Letterman a little bit of time to figure out the interviewing. But once he got it, yeah, I mean, I mean, unbelievable. And then Stern, once he started doing those long form interviews, yeah, he just became a different, almost like Charlie Rose went away and Dave Letterman kind of took over doing
Right.
those type of things. And yeah, his skill set. I've talked to people that went on Stern that were guests, and there was something almost hypnotic where stuff would come out of their mouths that they never would do in a regular interview. It'd almost be like they weren't aware that millions of people were listening to their interview, and something about Stern, and I'm guessing with Carson the same way, they were able to make their guests feel so comfortable and uninhibited that just the stuff would come out that maybe wouldn't come out with a normal interview.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a level of respect and just that, like you said, that the openness, you know what I mean? Like they're both master speakers when they're talking with the guest, and it's like, and they have ways of asking too, there's like an appropriate way to
Yeah.
ask, and there's like, an inappropriate way to ask, so to speak.
There's a curiosity, and I think Howard is at the point now where he took what Carson did was I'm going to make my guests look good. There were times where Letterman would, make fun of his guest or like some of them would get their feelings hurt and feel like Dave threw them under the bus. Where Howard, I mean, I'm trying to remember the last time. Can you? I can't think of anybody that he has had on in the last 10 years, 15 years, where he interviewed somebody on that stature that he made fun of or didn't have any other intention other than I'm going to make them look good. But
I do now. I don't know when he had. I only know this because I've seen some interviews with Howard Stern. But when he had Robin Williams on his show, yeah, he said that was one of his. He felt really bad because it was back early on in his career, and he was, of course, still trying to be that edgy, pushy kind of person,
oh yeah,
and he asked him about him having the affair with the nanny, I believe, or
yeah,
something like that. And yeah, I mean, to this day, at least I think the interview I saw was maybe within the last like 5 or 10 years. He said to this day it was the one interview that he really felt horrible that what he did, because instead of giving Robin the chance to do what Robin does best, to and he thought that he should try to do something to make it edgy, and by doing so he never had Robin back on, and he felt really bad about that incident. At least that's the only one that I've heard.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, people change. People hopefully grow as human beings, and that's nice that Howard can acknowledge that. I'm sure if Robin Williams came back, he'd be a different Howard with his approach, but that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Stern drastically changed. Like his 90s, it was shock and awe, like
Yeah,
sex, groupies, let's talk about what like the tin knocker wants to hear, you know what I mean? Like
sure.
now he's more, which was cool. I'm not hating on that
Yeah,
stuff, but now he's more like I want to be like Charlie Rose, like you said, you know what I mean? I want to be
yeah,
like respectable. And nowadays he has
yeah,
this vibe about him where like he seems so like super fanish with whoever he's talking to. I think that helps him too, where he's just like he's almost like talking like a super fan. So these people go, well, that's Howard Stern, dude, and he's like
yeah.
talking to me like that, like yeah, I'm gonna tell him whatever he wants to know, type deal.
Yeah,
But
I mean, so many people like Springsteen, presidential candidates are going through a show. I couldn't imagine that in the 90s. But
oh
he's
yeah,
become something else. I remember watching him when he was still on WOR, and he would
yeah,
have people like the underdog lady. I remember seeing her in Coney Island. She's wearing the underdog cape, and I'm like, oh my goodness, Howard Stern. And yeah, it just became something else. But I'm glad that he's getting those interviews, and I do think in decades from now, people are going to be watching some of those interviews and studying them, and I'm glad that he's capturing a lot of these icons and getting them to tell stories they've never talked about before. I think that's important.
yeah. I think he's burying a lot of that old stuff too, because he would have some wild. You got like Beetlejuice, you got like
Sure.
Daniel Carver, like the Klan member he'd bring on. Like he
I
would have
remember.
like some wild stuff that would like get you quote unquote canceled, today, so to speak. He,
Yeah, I remember when he had the E show, there was definitely it was like how outrageous can we maybe be? And
yeah.
yeah.
It's a weird flip, it's when I think of Stern, I always think of like he's doing so good and respectable now. It's like he's one of those dudes where it's like if some of the people that go like to cancel and go crazy at people like ever looked in the past of Stern, like he would have some issues, I feel, you know what I mean? But I don't know.
I never thought in a million years America's Got Talent. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
he definitely became somebody else. And yeah, I'm glad that I heard he re-upped on his contract.
Like
So
another 4 years. Yeah, I heard.
yeah, yeah. I
He'll
mean, that
never,
is
yeah. I
what's
could
up.
never see him quitting. I could never see him quitting. Yeah.
I don't know what else he would do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people thought Letterman, when he signed off at CBS in 2015, we'd never see him again. And I'm glad that he signed his deal with Netflix and we see him around. I mean,
Yeah.
some of these people, I mean, Johnny Carson walked away when he was 66, did some cameos here and there for 2 years, and then broke everybody's heart and never came back. He just thought the work was the best I'm going to do and didn't want to stick around too long. He thought that Lucille Ball and Jack Benny and Bob Hope just stuck around too long and the work
Hmm.
suffered. But I think Dave still does great work. I think Howard still does great work. And as long as people can show up and still be really good at what they do, keep going. Why not?
Yeah. Everybody loves and respects Carson. Do you think we'll ever find somebody in that seat that will be at that level?
It's really hard. I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, just the fact, again, like he's been off the air for 30 years and he's still the gold standard and still makes national news, and all the late night hosts are still talking about him. I doubt it. It seems like with the model now, network television, the ratings are going down every year and they're just becoming less profitable in terms of keeping a late night show. I mean, I just don't know if you're ever going to see a scale of somebody like Carson again. I hope so. I hope something like that always exists, but it seems some I've heard people that are TV experts saying that Johnny Carson might have been the biggest star television ever produced, and there's an argument there for that. He was born to do that job, and the work still. I mean, there's over 3 billion views on YouTube of Carson clips, and the official channel has over 1 million subscribers, so people miss him. The work lives on, which is good. I can't imagine anybody touching him in terms of a legacy in doing this. But hopefully, the late night shows there'll always be some sort of form out there. I hope so.
Yeah, and it was like pure, like natural, like the laughs were natural. Like I said, with like like the faces and stuff, it's like
Yeah.
it's almost time and a place type stuff. Like once you leave, like I don't know if we could ever go back. Like I think the way things are now, things are more, I guess, explicit for lack of a better word. Like there's more of a there is shock and awe. It's the wholesomeness of what Carson's show was. I feel I don't think we could ever go back to something like that. You know what I mean?
I, I don't think any of the current late night hosts, for whatever reason, to have to Carson just was so good at being self-deprecating and a lot of stuff that I just don't see on some of the late night shows. Like Carson, when he would bomb in the monologue, would be some of the funniest stuff with him
Yeah,
recovering and ad-libbing. And now the audiences are trained to clap no matter what. Back with Carson, it was either laugh or silence.
yeah,
And now if something doesn't get a laugh, they'll clap. And there's just that's very, very different. I don't think that it'll ever go back to what Carson was, but it was a special time when he was doing that. In the beginning, he was doing an hour and 45 minutes. That's how long the Tonight Show was, and it was the guy just was exhausted. I mean, now they do it's obviously an hour and they're tired. So what Carson was able to pull off in his body of work, yeah, I don't think anybody's ever gonna achieve what he did.
yeah. We're here to have good times, but I know that you want to promote the book, which is a really good book.
Oh,
So
thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. I can't believe I interviewed over 400 people. Yeah, love Johnny Carson. The reason it's called Love Johnny Carson, at least what the title means to me, is so many people I spoke with said I love Johnny Carson. I have to, in full disclosure, when I started the Carson podcast, I was very nervous because I thought I was going to get just negative story after negative story. Joan Rivers was one of maybe two or three people that would just say bad stuff about Carson and repeat it over and over. I'm telling you, I talked to over 400 people and the stories did not come. Overwhelmingly, I mean, I tried to get Miss Rivers, I tried to get Wayne Newton. There are only a few people that had problems. None of them would talk to me. But the
yeah,
400 people I talked to loved him. And the stories that came out were how much they loved him. The stories of kindness, those are the stories I got. Yes, he was a bad drunk. We go into his faults as well. But just the generosity that people, when they talk to me and just how emotional they got and his own friends. I mean, the media tried to make this guy to be cold and aloof, and
mm,
Johnny would kind of make fun of that. But the people that knew him that never really talked publicly told me consistently that he was almost the same Johnny on and off camera, which went completely against the media, what the media said. But it was a small group of people he felt comfortable with, that he demanded loyalty, he gave loyalty, and they all said that if he was your friend, he would do anything for you. So it was interesting. I was so happy that I got the positive stories because I didn't want to put anything negative out there too much. And
right.
when I started getting that this was going in a positive direction, I felt really good and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. With the drinking, I mean, do you think it would started as just kind of like a comfortable thing to be you're in front of so many people, you want to do a good performance, you want to be smooth and relatable with the guest? Do you think it probably started that way type deal?
I think it started just like back in the day, it was so much drinking and smoking, like everybody smoked and the drinking was always there. Johnny, when he was even a game show host, would go out to public to a restaurant and people would send over free drinks. Like customers would feel like they knew Johnny. They would sit
Right.
down at his table and the guy just couldn't get any peace. So sometimes somebody sent over a drink, he'd take a sip and he was a lightweight. And he would drink a glass of vodka during that hour and 45 minutes, then went down to 90 minutes, and he wouldn't be intoxicated on the show. That didn't happen. So he wasn't an alcoholic, the people that knew him would say, but it's when he did drink at a bar, he was out, when he would have more than two drinks, you just did not want to be around him. And he got arrested for drinking and driving in 1982, and he went on air and said, "You will never see me do this again," and he never did. And he finally got things a little bit more under control. But yeah, the alcohol thing was that and the smoking since he was 14. 2 packs of Pall Mall's unfiltered cigarettes, the one of the worst cigarettes you can do. And
Yeah.
then he leaves the show, finds out he has emphysema. It did him in. I mean, he died when he was 79. He told his brother near the end, it's the damn cigarettes. He tried to quit so many times, thoroughly addicted, and it killed him, unfortunately.
Fame in itself, when you're Carson and you have all those people knowing who you are, like you said with the drinks, you get a drink, you don't want to not drink the drink because then you're like, well, I'm upsetting a fan.
Yeah,
You
you want to be polite, but
Yeah,
that was, but I mean, he really wanted to be Nebraska, where he was from. Like Ed McMahon had a limousine. Ed's license plate said, "Here's Ed." Johnny thought it was ridiculous. Johnny drove himself. In the 70s, he'd bring a paper brown lunch sack lunch to work. He tried to be normal. He didn't have a bodyguard. Yes, he did have a nickel-plated gun. He had a permit to carry. He never had to use it, thank goodness. But I mean, the FBI had to protect his life so many times. I mean, Mark David Chapman, who killed John Lennon, had a short list of people to kill if it wasn't John Lennon. Johnny was on the list. So this
really.
was a guy who had to be very careful when he was out in the public eye, and just he couldn't get any rest. If people looked at him and thought he was cold and aloof, it was self-preservation. The guy could not go out in public
Mm.
and just have people, they felt they knew him. They went to bed with him at 11:30 and they felt that they were his friend, and he had trouble getting any peace off camera when he was in public.
I would love to have known what that here's Johnny in The Shining is reference to him.
Yeah,
I
they
would,
actually he
yeah.
loved it. They did
Okay.
an they actually did an anniversary show, one of Johnny's primetime anniversary shows, and they opened up with that clip of the Here's Johnny thing. He thought it was really cool. Back then, Jack Nicholson has never done a late night show. There's certain people back then, especially movie stars, that just did not do television. Robert De Niro, Meryl Streep, Pacino. Now they all do the late night shows. You have to
Yeah.
almost. They all do, but they wouldn't do Johnny show. So that would have been great to get Nicholson on, but they had the Nicholson believed you have mystique. If you're a movie star, you go on TV, they know who you are. No, let there be some mystery. So that was Nicholson.
That was a good, like, I give huge kudos to that. Nowadays everybody, you know everybody, and it's hard to, decipher them and the character they're playing. It was pretty
Yeah.
genius on their part in the
I
past to do that. Yeah.
agreed. There were certain people like James Gandolfini that I don't that he did a top 10 list on Letterman, but he never did a sit down. And I
Yeah.
think that mystery, he did very few interviews, and he was one of the last people that really kind of went that shied away from that. And I think like Bob Dylan doesn't do many interviews almost ever, and there's some mystery there. But for the most part, I think you're right. I kind of miss that when people you kind of didn't know what they were like, and that doesn't exist as much anymore.
Yeah. We'll talk to people and we talk about, like, you get asked the question, what do you think the difference is? I mean, the talent
Yeah.
levels are still the same, but what's the difference with that? And it's that
Yeah.
it's the personal deal with the
I,
audience. Yeah.
I give Mark Calloway, the Undertaker, so much credit for staying in
Yes.
character, and I couldn't believe when he finally started doing the interviews. I'm like, wow, this is who he is. I had heard people that met him said the nicest guy, but I'm like, what? Who is this guy? What is he really like? And I really respect that he went so many years without doing that, and I really enjoyed the entertainment on a different level, not knowing anything about who this guy really was, and I did like that a lot.
The kayfabe. Yeah, I was gonna actually
Yeah,
put them together, wrestlers and actors of that time. Like they don't want you to know
yeah,
the gimmick, you know what I mean?
totally. I missed that. I missed that a lot.
Even comedians where they would, like Dice and people
Mhm.
like that, where they're well with Dice. The thing with Dice, which is funny, is it's very wrestler like because he created this character that I almost feel like he slowly became. Like you put on the cape so long, you
Yeah.
eventually are Superman forever. I think that
Mhm.
that's what happened to Dice. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, it's hard to tell sometimes, right? I've seen those clips on CNN where they're asking him about being a manager at a gym and he starts swearing and doing
yeah,
F-bombs on television, and I'm just like, is this Andrew Clay? Is this Dice? Like who, where does it stop? Where does it, yeah, it's interesting.
Alex. I know I've been talking a lot. I know you got questions. Yeah.
I've been talking
Hey,
too.
hey, hey, man, hey! I just love the stories. I mean, heck, as long as the stories and it just keep going, I'm cool with it. The only thing I would like ask is, I briefly checked out your IMDb page. It looks like you worked on like the Colbert Report,
I
on
did.
like an episode, and
Yeah.
I was curious, how was it working with Stephen Colbert? I mean, I've been a fan of his for years, and I just wonder how it was working with him.
I have to say, first of all, I've been interviewed so many times over the last 15 or 20 years. I think you were maybe one of the first or second people to ever ask me that question, and I really do appreciate that. I don't know why people don't bring it up. He's one of the nicest individuals I've ever worked for. We were at this really small Comedy Central show, and he wasn't really famous off the Daily Show. We were told we would have 40 episodes, and if the show went well, Comedy Central would extend it. And I knew Jon Stewart was producing it. I knew Stephen Colbert's work. I'd met him at the Dana Carvey show when I was 19 backstage. I'd gone to the show, and Colbert wouldn't remember this. And just a really, really nice guy. And for that show to become so famous for this small show that was supposed to be 40 episodes, and then Comedy Central renewed it, made it a whole year, and it became, I mean, Colbert just blew up. It was really, really cool to be there. I loved it. I was there for 3 years and 8 months from the beginning. We did 4 test shows. He was good right away. It was really fun getting to meet the guest if I wanted to. In terms of wrestling, I was back there with Jesse Ventura talking about with him. He was really cool. But then, musicians and actors or politicians, it was always we had some really fun guests, and it was one of those shows. Some of those shows you're not the people that work there are not allowed to go back and say hi to the guests, but we, for the most part, if we asked ahead of time, we were allowed to almost always.
Hmm.
So we were in a unique situation, but he was just a really, really nice man. I consider myself lucky that I got to work with him.
What exactly happened with Colbert recently? Like they were trying to pull his show off or something?
I all I know is that he's number one in the ratings, and it
Yeah.
never occurred to me in a million years that you could get canceled and be number one. CBS, I believe, said that his show was not profitable and it was losing 20 million a year. I have no idea if it was a political reason or if it was not. Usually, what happens is they will get scaled back. Like Seth Meyers, they took away his band.
Hmm.
There's usually some baby steps to cancellation. To my knowledge, there wasn't any. We're going to scale back. Johnny Carson had something like 7 or 8 writers at the most. All these shows have over 20 writers. There was no scaling back that I'm aware of. It was just that he was told out of the blue, you're losing, the show's losing money. We're going to pull the plug. That's, to my knowledge, all I know. They're ending the show in May. I know people at the show, and my knowledge, they don't know or haven't been told when the last show is going to be. But I hope for employment purposes that he comes back and does something, and that he can take everybody with him, just for people's jobs. But I would be shocked if CBS comes back with a late night show of their own.
Hmm.
It seems that those things just are not profitable anymore. At least the to the size, to the scale of how they are now.
Yeah, I mean, their politics have to play some type of thing into it, right? Everybody,
I don't know. There's
politics almost,
speculation.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, well, Kimmel, yeah, Kimball too. They pulled him off for a little bit. They let him back on, but like,
Yeah, he just signed a year to do a year more. I do not know. I don't know speculation wise.
yeah,
Fallon is really the one that doesn't really get into politics, and he's, I guess, in maybe third place in the ratings. Maybe he's tied for two. I don't know. But Stephen Colbert, this first year when he was on The Late Show on CBS, he wasn't, you couldn't tell his politics. I mean, he had the president on his show and didn't ask him. He maybe asked him one tough question, but it was like, he didn't show what his politics. And then when he started to really take a political stance, that's when he became number one. And, he's responsible for 200 plus employees and crew people. Once you're number one, I would think you would want to do what works. And he's been in number one ever since. So I
yeah.
get why that has happened. I mean, the first year, the critics and the people that were watching were like, "This is a terrible idea. He's number three. It's not going to work." And he figured out a way to make it work. Again, it never occurred to me you could be number one and get yanked out like that. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, those tough questions is what everybody wants to hear. I know people, it's uncomfortable, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
those are the important things, you know what I mean? And hosting a
yeah,
late night show, your opinion, your questions, like it's a very valuable position to be in community, you know what I mean? That
yeah.
a lot of people are watching, and
Yeah.
it's a good spot. Maybe that's why they're trying to pull people out of those positions.
I'm not really sure. Johnny Carson believed 100%. Why would I want to alienate half my audience by giving my political opinion? Carson's whole
Yeah.
thing was, I'm going to make fun of whoever's the president. It's going to be in good fun. I'm going to go after whoever, and my people will not know my personal politics. He believed I'm doing an entertainment show. People are going to bed with me at 11:30. They don't want anything heavy. And that Carson dominated for 30 years. Things have changed, obviously. Back when Carson, there were three networks. I mean, Carson definitely had competition. He beat everybody. People would, try to take on Carson. Their shows would be canceled, and then they'd be guest with Carson again, and he'd have them on, and people would be like, talk about how hard it was hosting those shows. But yeah, there's just so many more options now, obviously, with cable and YouTube and shows. So it's just things have just changed, obviously.
With all the questions that you got to ask about Johnny and all the people that knew
Yeah.
him, do you have were there any answers that came back that were shocking that you blew your mind?
I mean, I just couldn't get over the fact that the guy had friends and his generosity, like saving a comedian's life from drugs, one thing after another from
Yeah,
these people. I couldn't put everything in the book. Like
right.
one of the writers who was going through a painful divorce, and he said, Johnny asked if he could take me out to dinner because Johnny famously was married four times. And the carrying thing, I had no idea that there were all these stories that were going to be poured out. Those were the things. And I was shocked how social he was in retirement because the media made it out to be like this man is a recluse. He's JD Salinger. He's Greta
Great
Garbo,
show. Yeah.
recluse. And he definitely liked his alone time and he'd be on his boat, but he'd be having lunch with his writers. He'd be out and about going to tennis tournaments. He'd go to Wimbledon. He was with the NBC president Bob Wright. They'd go all over the place. He definitely was social. He'd be taking magic lessons. So there were definitely preconceived notions I believed from media reports that just to get those completely disproven, I just was very, very surprised that an icon on this level for 30 years that dominated that the media could get this guy so wrong until at least that I started talking to people that I was just like, I need to write a book and put these stories in to show, at least from the people that knew him, who this guy was.
You ever wonder, like, if you got a chance to sit down with Johnny, like any big questions you would want to have asked him?
I pretty much got most of my questions answered. I think I'd probably want to talk a little bit about the New York years just because I don't know if you know this or not. NBC erased almost everything of Johnny's first 10 years, and Johnny was furious. They didn't tell Carson they were going to erase it. So I definitely have lots of questions. There are some things, kinescopes in some shows here and there that are saved, but for the most part, it's gone. So I definitely there are some things with the New York years. I think I'd probably want to ask him about, or maybe certain guess why he stopped having them on. Now, I do answer in the book like why does Jerry Lewis, why was he stopped being booked? Well, he yelled at Johnny Carson's cue card person, and Johnny was furious. And if Johnny believed if you're going to come into my home and be a guest or guest host, you're going to treat everyone with respect. And if Johnny found out that somebody was inappropriate or treated his staff like that, you were gone. So definitely a lot of those things were answered, but there are definitely certain guests that I would ask them maybe why were they stopped? Why did you stop booking them? And things like that. But a lot of them, I'd say the vast majority of my questions I was thankfully able to get answered with the podcast and with the book.
Were those first 10 years lost because they like re-recorded over the tape? So they just,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah, NBC didn't.
horrified.
They did not see any value whatsoever. Johnny was furious with it, and yeah, they did an anniversary show in 1972 when they moved after 10 years. They moved to Burbank, and they couldn't show clips because they really didn't have enough clips. So they just had to have guests in tuxedos. They had like Jack Benny, Jerry Lewis, all these famous people. And they had to really build up that library again to start doing the annual clip shows. They definitely had some from New York, but yeah, Johnny never forgave NBC for that.
Was it at like those 10 years that was the stop of that, the fact that that's when it became Carson Productions, or what happened with that?
Johnny did not get control of the show until 1980. He became owner. And I think once he found out they erased it, he said this has never happened. And again, and at one point he was responsible for 25% of NBC's profits and was like the biggest star, him and Bob Hope. In I think NBC at this point, the power dynamic started where NBC would order Carson around, and then the power dynamic changed around like the mid 60s, where NBC's like, we need this guy, we're going to do anything he says. And he let NBC have it when they erased the shows, and then NBC knew we're not going to do this again. So
He have Salvatore Dali on there.
he did a bunch of
Yeah.
times in New York. He would have the most eccentric people on.
Yeah.
The show was at this point would have been about 90 minutes, maybe an hour 45, and he would have the artist on. He would have authors. It was yeah, some of the biggest people you would imagine that would go through that show. It was remarkable who he would have on.
Yeah, I love going back. Johnny, interviews and other folks from that era, like just to
Yeah.
talk to some of the authors of that time and stuff that you never get anymore. It's very, very cool stuff.
No, it's very different. People would go on with albums and people would go on with books that were unknowns and he'd get them on the New York Times bestseller list. I mean, it was in terms of launching people, authors especially, that was the show.
Mark, this was fantastic, man.
This was fun. Both of you were so nice to have me on. I'm honored. I know you've had such interesting guests with
Thank you.
much more longer careers than I have and interesting people. So I'm honored to talk to you both.
Well, you're gonna have a long career as well. You know
I
what I
hope
mean?
so. I hope you're right.
You
But
know,
this has been so much fun. You're both so good at what you do, and
thank
this
you.
has been fun. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, we'll
We're
definitely have you back.
I would love to have you back on.
Oh, I'd love to. Anytime, please let
You
me know.
know,
That's just been great.
where the book's on Amazon. We'll put a link in the
Oh,
description for
great.
anybody that wants to go pick
Appreciate
it
it.
up. It's a great read, whether you know Johnny or wanting to know about Johnny. I definitely recommend picking it up. It's a really great read.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I did the audiobook for over 5 days, so that's on Audible as well. I did my best. I was very nervous, but I did
Yeah.
my best. So, but yeah.
And also your podcast. Where can people get hear your podcast?
Oh, they can go to carsonpodcast.com wherever you listen to podcasts. Almost 400 episodes. We're doing some new episodes as well. And then I do a podcast called Inside Late Night, which is part of latenighter.com. Late Nighter is late night news, past and present. And I talk to people from Saturday Night Live, people that went on Letterman, writers, producers, talent. So been doing that for a while as well.
Heck yeah, dude. I love it, dude. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you thank you very much. We'll definitely gonna have you on in the future, man. Keep doing
Can't
what you're
wait.
doing. You're doing a lot of really cool stuff. Give you your
Thanks.
flowers. You know what I mean? Great work. Keep up the
This
great
is fun.
work. And
Right back at you. Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, with that being said, we'll catch y'all. Everybody go support Mark and get the book, get the book and the audio book, get both right there. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Check out the podcast and keep on rocking in the free world. You know what I mean?
Well, I gotta say that was a lot of fun. It was great having Mark on the show. Again, like we said earlier, Mark reached out to us, and I am so happy that he did, because this was a great interview where I know I myself learned a lot about Johnny Carson that I had no idea about. Um, and it's one of the best things I think about this interview, about the conversation, was how we as fans, as audience members, can mistake a person. I mean, like Mark said, that people thought he was aloof, that he was closed off and all of that, and then all these rivalries or like issues that he had with other people, that Mark thought he was going to get a lot of people bashing him or giving him a hard time,
Yeah.
but he found out that a lot of people loved him, that the thing is, the reason that a lot of the strife between Johnny Carson and other people, a lot of it was, he was a guy that believed in loyalty above all else. And if you, did not, you know, show him respect, or, remember that he helped you out, and then you tried to steal his people for your own show, yeah, there was no coming
Shady
back from
work. That's shady work, my friend.
that. Yeah.
In this episode, we talked a lot about with Letterman and both Carson, how they kind of wanted their alone time. And it's like, you got to assume, you got to understand, when you're one of these people and you are once a night, you're speaking with a million people. They might not all be in that studio audience with you, but you got the studio audience. You have all these people. It's like you're thrown in front of so many people. You know what I mean? That like when you have downtime, you want like downtime. You want personal downtime to like decompress and like do life. You know what I mean? And not
Yeah.
have to be on and worry about stuff.
There was, I forget, there were two actors, and unfortunately, I mean, I heard this story a while ago.
Yeah.
One was mainly known for being a movie actor. Another one was a TV show personality, and you know, uh, they were walking down. I think it was like New York City, and um, he he was talking to him, and he said, what's the difference between you and I? And the movie star was saying this, and TV star says, what? He says, as a movie star, people look at me as kind of on a pedestal. Okay, I am, kind of someone that they either want to be, or someone that they think that is great. Kind of almost kind of like a worship mentality.
Yeah.
But you're
Idolize.
their uncle, you're their brother, you are part of their family. They are sitting in bed, they turn on the TV, and you're there. So there's always, when you are an actor on a TV show, especially a late night show, and I think more of a late night show, because you kind of more feel like the person on the late night show is closer to them. Like they're not, you don't feel like they're putting on a character. You feel like they're, actually who you see on the show.
Yeah.
And especially, if you're watching Johnny Carson before going to bed every night, you kind of feel like you have a kind of connection with them. And of course, you still have to remember that in reality, if back then you went up to Johnny Carson like, "Hey, Johnny, how you doing? Great to see you." He doesn't know you, but you know him,
Yeah.
and that's kind of a bit of a disconnect. So I can totally understand with Johnny wanting to kind of distance himself, because I'm sure when he was walking out there, so many people would like go up and kind of almost expect a kind of a level of almost intimacy that you don't
Yeah,
really have.
fans aren't always the sanest of people too.
Hey,
And
don't say that. Don't say that. We're quite safe.
the sanest of people aren't always the ones that say, "Hey, I'm going to approach this person." Sometimes it's the insane people, insane in the membrane type people. You know what I mean? Um, like I said, fame's a crazy thing. Um, Not a lot. I mean, super fame like that. Um, it's even when you can kind of can understand it, you know what I mean? And well, this would be difficult, that would be different. You can't unless you're literally in those shoes as just as a spectator. I don't think you can understand fame. You can go, okay, yeah, this is different. I'm not going to be able to go to Walmart to get this, or you know what I mean. I can't just go to a ball game without getting swarmed. Like that stuff, but living in it, and I guess we can only speak for ourselves because we're world famous. It's a different lifestyle. Like you can know, but you don't really know until you're there. You know what I mean? So same thing like when we do conventions, you know, got the Billy Zane story. Everybody say Billy Zane. I don't want to put him on blast. People say Billy Zane isn't. I've heard people say Billy Zane not maybe the most welcoming, warm guy. I met him. I think you were at the table when he came by. Super cool dude. Like I'll stand here to say that Billy Zane's the man. Um, but it's one of those things where it's like you can't be on all the time, and you're a regular dude. Like Billy Zane's more of, I don't know why I'm talking about Billy Zane, but Billy Zane I always took to be more of like an artist, if you will. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm going to a weird place, I guess. I don't know, but I always assumed him to be a dude that was just got into it. Like some people will get into arts or into movies and stuff for fame, and then some people do it because they like the artistry of it. And Billy's a dude that I think likes the artistry of it. So like, and we're artists, sometimes artists aren't exactly, you know, the most outspoken, the most come like, give me a hug. Sometimes they're quiet, they're laid back, they're in the back of the room type deal. So like when they're put in a position to be the come give me a hug guy, it's a very different thing. And a lot of them aren't gonna fake the funk, which I can appreciate. Shout out Billy Zane. I don't know why I even went down this path, but it's the outro. So my mind's gone bizarre. I'm drinking waters to make sure I'm okay. But yeah, fame, just the whole fame thing. And when you're Carson, dude, it's like, my God, like there's very few people I think that have touched, like you said, 30 years, and Homeboy was on top for a lot of that, if not all of it. So it's just a weird element, and the drinking and stuff I think is more, we talked about how it came in before the show a little bit, before he like kind of got to that place. But it's like, if you're like an what is it? What is it, invert, exvert? What do they call that?
Or introvert is
When
when you're
you're
in yourself.
if you're like an introvert and you're trying, you're in that position. Yeah, that's tough, man, because now you have to be like Carson was always smiling, always friendly. You know what I mean? I can't say always, but on the show, and then you get out your regular life, don't know what these people are going through. You know, just because you've seen them smiling the other night doesn't mean the next day they're still smiling. Everybody deals with real life issues and problems. You know what I mean? It's one of those deals. It's like, for all you know, he just got off the phone and somebody knows is like dying of some disease or something. And, these people are expecting you to be, hey, how you doing? Come over here, give me a hug. You know what I mean? So it's tricky. And I don't think we've really talked, when I think of all the people that we've ever talked about with guests and stuff like that or had on the show, like the level of fame that Johnny Carson had was kind of unmatchable. I think there's only few certain people that can actually understand that. You know what I mean? Here's Johnny. I'm glad to hear that he dug his reference in The Shining. I wish Stanley Kubrick gave me a reference somewhere. Reference, man. He did the BoomBastiCAST piece at the end of Eyes Wide Shut or something. We would have been down with it. You know what I mean? But do you want to say anything in closing or?
Nothing much more to add other than it was a great interview. It was great talking to him, and he has so much wealth of information,
Very, yeah.
experiences. I mean, talking to some great people that I mean that unfortunately have passed away. Gilbert
Yeah.
Godfrey, Norm Macdonald, great talents.
Yeah.
And, and I gotta say, it was great talking to him. And I mean, being fans ourselves of these people, and now that they've gone on to the other side, it's
Yeah.
great to find someone who's actually talked to him and hear these stories that you might not have heard before. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. Definitely, think we're going to be bringing him back on. We'll see. And it was a great interview. I had a lot of fun.
Very smart and likable guy. You know what I mean? Mark was it was a pleasure to have him on the show. I'm glad he likes what we do because we like what he does. You know what I mean?
Heck yeah.
So with that being said, we're gonna give that BoomBastiCAST piece so we can get Kubrick to come back and put us in Eyes Wide Shut, and that is what we're doing right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We know we enjoyed getting into you, and we hope everybody's being well over there and being good. And with that being said, we'll catch y'all on the next episode of the BoomBastiCAST.
Peace.
Peace.